Abilities as we know them now were introduced in Generation 3. Some have been great, some have been mediocre, and some have been absolutely terrible. Pokémon is a massive ecosystem, with many winners and losers of various degrees. Not all abilities will be viable in the upper echelons of every kind of competitive play, but at the same time we can't leave some of these abilities drowning in the deep end of the pool. Today I'd like to grant some buffs to some abilities and give them a little more purpose. It will be similar to my videos about improving Pickpocket and Illuminate. However, this time there aren't enough changes to warrant separate videos. Keep in mind that these ability buffs aren't purely from the frame of competitive play, but to also broaden its purpose in the greater franchise. Things like casual play, remakes, spin-offs, the anime, mods, derivative fan games, the list goes on and on. So take a moment to turn off your brain and ignore the current meta of whatever format you're playing right now, and think generally about how Pokémon works as a game series. Runaway is an ability that only applies to wild Pokémon encounters. If you run from a wild battle, your escape is guaranteed. The change is simple. Any Pokémon with Runaway ability will be immune to trapping moves, abilities, or effects, and always be able to switch out no matter the situation. Basically everyone has thought this and has said this since 2003, but I'm bringing it up because it's obligatory. Though I have a few stipulations I want to add that I hadn't seen before. They aren't necessary, but at least add my twist to the buff. Runaway should make Pursuit's effect fail when switching. I know Pursuit doesn't exist anymore, but I'm hoping it comes back or gets a special clone. If for some reason we get a hazard that hurts you when switching out, an exit hazard if you will, a Pokémon with Runaway also outruns that. Runaway Pokémon should always escape, in every situation, for free, when switching or running. The only exception should be story battles or trainer battles where fleeing would break the game or plot. Lastly, each time you hit a Runaway Pokémon with a trapping move, damaging, or status, the Pokémon will get a stage of speed. Most Runaway Pokémon are pretty fast, but this gives a bit of love to the slow Pokémon that get Runaway. Still a situational ability, but hopefully not as narrowly specific. Forecast needs a rock-type form for cast form. I know it's supposed to look like a water molecule, and change to water and ice, but it has a sunny form. Sure, the sun fuses hydrogen which creates energy, the sun's energy is why it can be sunny, and the sun's heat tends to cause evaporation, but it's still not a form of water. And why is the base form a normal type instead of being flying type for evaporated water? Anyway, the game world made Sandstorm a weather. So we're getting cast form as a rock in a sandstorm now. That's that. Iron Fist boosts the power of punching moves. That boost should be bumped up from a 20% increase to a 40 or 50% increase on punching moves. The reasoning is pretty simple. The other power boosting abilities are always stronger, but affect moves that aren't that much weaker than the punches. A reason they might have been afraid to give a bigger boost is because of when the ability came out, Generation 4. The physical special split had just been implemented, so the elemental punches gave electric, ice, and fire covers to a ton of Pokémon that could now use their better attacking stat for something that was once magic. But now we know that the game can handle a stronger Iron Fist boost. If we look at its cousins, Strong Jaw for biting moves and Sharpness for cutting moves, both grant a 50% power boost. Strong Jaw in particular has access to the elemental fang attacks and even the dual screen shattering psychic fangs. Fang attacks may generally have lower base power than punches, but why punish Iron Fist and punches for the inadequacies of biting moves? Of the hundreds of moves, only a few are punches. If a Pokémon has access to this ability and a decent amount of punches, it's specific enough to deserve the boost. Consider how much better Tough Claw's ability is compared to Iron Fist. Tough Claws grants a 30% boost to all contact moves. Not all physical moves, all contact moves. That is a bigger boost and covers all physical and special moves classified as contact. If a Pokémon has access to both Iron Fist and Tough Claws, you would pick Tough Claws nearly every time because Tough Claws grants greater damage on punches and still boosts non-punch contact moves. With this proposed change, Iron Fist joins the other abilities that give a big boost for committing to a narrow move class without being outclassed by the generalist ability. Early Bird is next, and it's in an odd place. This ability makes Pokémon wake up twice as fast when sleeping. Normally when a Pokémon is put to sleep, the game randomly generates the number of sleep turns to count down from before the Pokémon can wake up. Early Bird cuts the generated sleep turns in half, then rounds down. It's not a bad ability per se, but it's usually outclassed by abilities that negate sleep. The exception is if a Pokemon uses rest as part of its strategy. Unlike sleep-negating abilities like Insomnia or Vital Spirit, early bird Pokemon can use rest, and even better, they will wake up after just one turn of rest-induced sleep. Despite this, most Pokemon that have access to early bird would rather be using their other abilities for competitive play. It's definitely more valuable as an option for non-competitive play, challenge runs, and spin-off games. Overall, early bird is a small benefit, but not an active deterrent, so it needs metagames and gameplay situations where sleep is oppressive to be really valuable. Now that you know how it works, what can we give it that would make it a little better? Well, most localizations of the ability perfectly capture its Japanese name, Hayaoki, because they all refer to the action of waking up early for productivity or good health. Mechanically, I want early bird to be more of a deterrent to opponents. Thematically, I'd like to lean into the idea of early to bed, early to rise, where better sleep produces better health, better productivity, and better proactivity. Firstly, when an early bird Pokemon wakes up from sleep, it should gain 1/4 HP when waking up early. Consistent, quality sleep is important for recovery and good health. Most living things sleep in cycles. Being put to sleep with a Pokemon move is disruptive, and the act of waking up during battle likely means that a sleeping Pokemon cannot properly finish a sleep cycle. This also explains why many sleep moves cause erratic and inconsistent sleep cycles that can't heal, but rest is consistent and quality sleep that heals. A Pokemon with early bird completes sleep cycles faster, and thus can get quality sleep even from the erratic sleep-inducing moves. Mechanically, this punishes the opponent for using a sleep move, which makes it a stronger deterrent. I'm open to the heal occurring instantly or upon waking. Next, early bird Pokemon will increase speed by 1 stage upon waking. Thematically, this represents proactivity and productivity. Mechanically, it punishes opponents for putting you to sleep, makes it harder for them to outspeed you, and makes it more difficult to put you back to sleep. Sleep is an inconsistent and rare status effect, but very strong. With these changes, early bird has a little more utility and becomes a better alternative to outright sleep negation. You still fall asleep, but in return, you wake twice as fast and still can use rest. You newly gain 25% HP and a speed boost just for waking up. It's a deterrent with a nice bonus, but it's not broken because you can't quickly amass the health and speed boosts. Really, if early bird plus rest setup is your win condition, there might be an issue with your sweeper. I certainly could have made the ability negate sleep, but that's a little boring and other people have already come up with that. Plus, I wanted to preserve the idea of an ability that punishes opposing sleep, but allows self-induced sleep. Another alternative is to have +1 priority when waking up, which is interesting, but its inconsistency could complicate things in doubles or even singles. Anticipation is another example of an ability that is pretty inconsistent. Pokemon with Anticipation experience a deadly premonition. No, not like that. They have an overwhelming premonition of danger when the opponent knows a super effective move. In Japanese, it is Hikenyochi, which can be interpreted as danger premonition or danger sense. It's like in media where characters can sense strong opponents or bloodlust, and even in shows when there is no established system for detecting opponents, experienced characters get a feel for when something is approaching. It's fitting. In non-competitive gameplay, Anticipation is pretty useful because it can telegraph problematic moves that random trainers and wild Pokemon have. It's particularly nice for challenge runs and modded versions of games where Pokemon may have unexpected or unofficial coverage. In competitive game modes, the ability loses value based on a player's experience level and familiarity with the metagame. For example, my opponent has a Luxray, and I switch in my ground type on the predicted wild charge. My ground type has Anticipate and shudders detecting a super effective move. Because I have years of experience, in a variety of game modes, it's easy to deduce the situation. Luxray is a Pokemon plagued with bad coverage in most games. Hidden Power doesn't exist anymore, and since there is no other super effective move that it can use right now, it has to know Ice Fang. In this situation, Anticipation isn't as useful because I can recognize or predict movesets pretty well. Recognition and prediction of what is possible and likely is just a part of high-level gameplay. It's probably going to stay mostly useless to competitive players without some very heavy reworking, so let's just make it a little more useful for the general populace. Right now, the ability triggers and gives a message about the Pokémon shuddering if it detects a super effective move, specifically when the Anticipation Pokémon switches in. It triggers at the same time that Frisk, another ability, would activate. The difference is that Frisk specifically tells you the held item by name for each opposing Pokémon from left to right, so it's an excellent scouting tool. Borrowing from Frisk, I'd like to make Anticipation do something similar. Anticipation will reveal a move, by name, from the moveset of each Pokémon in battle from left to right. This will happen each time they switch in, and the game will remember what it already revealed and avoid repeating until it's revealed each move. It's unlikely that an Anticipation Pokémon will be switching in and out that often, so that should be fine. There are a few reasons that I'm not just making it detect and announce a super effective move, the move that will do the most damage before or after modifiers, or the highest BP move. 1. It's pretty obvious that Pokémon have their stabs and coverage. 2. High base power moves are common and expected. 3. Anticipation scouting ability is based on weakness, and you wouldn't want to be weak to moves. 4. It completely leaves out status moves. If Anticipation has a chance to call out specific move names without repetition, at least until all 4 moves are revealed, then you can slowly gather intel without relying on or fixating on weaknesses. Encore, Ally Switch, Natural Gift, Nature Power, Follow Me, Trick Room, Spikes, Dragon Dance, Calm Mind, and so many other moves potentially being called out will be valuable. Consider a first turn scenario where I lead with an Anticipation Galarian Rapidash and my opponent leads with Lucario. Normally, Anticipation triggers and it doesn't really matter because I know the Steel type has a Steel type move. However, in our alternate world line, Anticipation triggers and reveals the move Nasty Plot. Now I know that this Lucario is aiming at some point to special sweep as opposed to physically sweep and can play appropriately. Even if Anticipation didn't happen to reveal Nasty Plot, instead revealing Aura Sphere or a cheeky move like Dark Pulse, it would still signal to me that this specific Lucario is at the very least a mixed attacker and not the standard set. Revealing a status move or the classification of a move could also convey what held item, ability, nature, and EVs are being used by a Pokémon. If Anticipation reveals Trick or Switcheroo on an offensive Pokémon, I can deduce a choice item. If Anticipation reveals very common moves that are 60 base power or lower, my opponent might be using Technician ability. If Anticipation reveals Gyro Ball on a Pokémon, it might be slower than the standard set. A key point to remember is that you can scout and now even potentially confirm this information before your opponent actually takes their turn and reveals their moves. Imagine being constantly scouted by a defensive Pokémon like Anticipation Ferrothorn. Just from switching in once, it potentially scouts a move you didn't use, tags and scouts the predicted move aimed at its partner, and potentially scouts whether or not you have a coverage move for it when it double switches out. That's just from a singles perspective. Double battles are shorter and played in sets, so being able to lift team info faster with Anticipation would be helpful in games without team sheets. In all these scenarios, I'm assuming that the Pokémon with Anticipation is relevant enough to see use and doesn't have a better ability. With these changes, I don't expect Anticipation to be broken enough to be actively used over other abilities, or good enough to use unviable Pokémon just for access to Anticipate. But I do expect Anticipate to convey information better than it currently does regardless of what Pokémon it does end up on. Forewarn ability is a semi-clone of Anticipation. Rather than detect if a super effective move vaguely exists, Forewarn explicitly tells you the strongest move an opponent knows, or a random status move if the opponent has no attacks. We could make it do the same thing that the new Anticipation does, or give it something different. Playing with this prophetic dream theme could create some unfun and inconsistent competitive experiences. For example, what if it had increased invasion only on the turn it switches in, or increased invasion when switching into the strongest move specifically? Knowing your opponent's next move and announcing it is one thing, but going further would be to evade it. What if it revealed your opponent's ability? What if it completely doxed your opponent and just told you their entire moveset? These are certainly completely ridiculous and arguably broken, but at least Forewarn is trapped on 3 mediocre Pokémon families that still probably wouldn't be worth using. though the instant they drop a conventionally high-value Pokémon with a broken version of Forewarn, it would be a problem. I'll leave the decision for this one up to you all. Should we leave it alone? Make it like Buffed Anticipation? Make it reveal all 4 moves? Should it play with evasion or something else? As long as it keeps with the theme of a prophetic dream, it should be fine. Tangled Feet is an ability that grants a large evasion boost to a Pokémon while it is confused. To be very clear, the tottering steps of a Pokémon with this ability is temporary. The evasion boost goes away as soon as confusion wears off, so you can't stack stages or baton pass the boosts. This ability isn't very good. The premise of it is terrible for Pokemon's battle system, and it would be more effective to just replace it entirely. This is because evasion strategies are very inconsistent and confusion isn't strong enough to warrant specifically using this ability. Despite how foolish this ability is, it's still funny. The spirit of the ability is just a kid-friendly version of Drunken Fist fighting styles. An intoxicated fighter should be unstable and not be thinking clearly, but the Drunken Fist weaponizes their unpredictability to evade and land unblockable attack patterns. Rather than a power or defense boost, they can now overwhelm their opponents with this unorthodox combat flow. Why not lean heavier into this and make Tangled Feet an evasive threat that's hard to defend against like the Drunken Fist? Tangled Feet will now avoid critical hits, increase speed, increase critical hit rate, increase critical hit damage, and increase evasion, only while the Pokémon is actively confused. I chose these effects specifically because they are weird and erratic. The experience of confusing a Pokémon, only to have it suddenly outspeed and crit you, is definitely how I imagine losing to a Drunken Fist fighting style user. A Pokémon with Klutz is just that, a Klutz. It's very, very clumsy. Bukyo desu yo ne? Yes, in fact, so clumsy that they can't use held items. The exception being form change items, Megastones, Z crystals, blue orbs, red orbs, or items with out-of-battle effects. There's a bunch of other little details, but it doesn't matter right now. The ability's sole purpose is to allow a Pokémon to harmlessly hold a disruptive item, then use Trick or Switcheroo to swap it onto the opponent. This ability has a niche and I like the way the effect functions, but let's pretend I had to change it. I don't buy that someone too clumsy to use a held item would have the coordination to elegantly switch them with Trick or Switcheroo. So I'd instead make a Pokémon with Klutz be a clumsy inconvenience to others and itself. When a Klutz Pokémon switches in, it accidentally knocks off the opponent's item and drops its own item. If the held item is consumable, it's triggered and consumed instantly. It's the true duality of a Klutz. The clumsiness can work in your favor to immediately trigger benefits earlier than intended, like using stat boost berries and things like that. However, that same clumsiness will ruin strategies that require proper timing, like a power herb or damage reduction berries, because it will clumsily trigger them as soon as it switches in. Since I like the original ability effect, I'd pair the old effect with a new ability, Ditz or Ditzy. A Ditzy Pokémon holds items no problem. It just keeps forgetting to use the held item, so the effect of the item doesn't trigger ever. It only remembers that it has a held item when its trainer commands it to use Trick, Switcheroo, or Fling. Even after using Thief or Covet, it's too much of a ditz to remember that it has a newly stolen item. The other localizations can use whatever kid-appropriate slang to convey absent-mindedness or forgetfulness, because the Pokémon is an airhead that straight up forgets to use its held item all battle unless reminded. Slow Start only have speed now instead of having both attack and speed. Next! Big Pecks normally prevents a Pokémon from suffering defense drops. I'm adjusting it to prevent attack and defense drops. There's a reason to this madness. The ability's name in Japanese is Hatomune, or Pigeon Breast. It's fitting because the breast muscles of birds have to be very large and strong to generate the force to take flight, so all the bird Pokémon with big pecks would need big pecks to fly. Just like this video's sponsor, the chest fly. The chest fly is a strength training exercise where individuals squeeze their arms together against resistance mainly to strengthen their pectoralis major. It's like flying, so if you want big pecs, do some chest flies in multiple angles using resistance bands, cable machines, or dumbbells. Throw in some press-ups at different angles as well. Remember to work out responsibly for a healthy heart that you can be proud of. Oh my goodness, there's another pun here. I just realized that Hatomune could also be like a proud heart. Hato being heart, and mune conveying an idea of reverence or honor. It's a bunch of puns, but the point of the ability is that these are plucky birds that won't turn tail, so you can't drop their attack or defense. The last bit of trivia, a mangaka with the pen name Hatomune Suru created a one-shot called A Naked Swan. It might just be a coincidence, but that avian pen name lines up really well with swan. Oh, unless the Hatomune in the pen name actually refers to really big. Victory Star is now 25% accuracy boost for the team. Check the Illuminate video for context. Last but not least, Mycelium Might. This ability allows a Pokemon to use status moves and ignore the effects of abilities that would have negated the status move. To compensate, the Pokemon will always move last within its priority bracket when using a status move. I think that's unnecessary. First off, this ability is a worse version of Mold Breaker. Mold Breaker also ignores abilities when using all moves, even damaging moves. Mycelium Might is limited to status. Next, Mold Breaker doesn't make you go last, so a Pokemon like Hawlucha can use Mold Breaker to attack or status through abilities before the opponent gets to move. I get that Game Freak might have had some reservations about making a fast Spore user that can put almost anything to sleep while ignoring abilities, but this solution is foolish. Mycelium Might does force Insomnia and Vital Spirit Pokemon to fall asleep, but then their abilities instantly wake them up. So Mycelium Might effectively makes you go second for no reason. The Mold Breaker aspect rarely comes into play, which makes Toedscruel a random Pokemon that is fast when attacking but slow when statusing. But Toedscruel can go through good as gold, so at least you can put gold and go to sleep. Nice, you listed one specific situation out of the millions you could be in. To fix this ability, we are removing the part about going last. It's an ability that allows you to status through abilities. It's worse than Mold Breaker, and you still can't get past type immunities, but you can spore anything through their ability. These were the abilities that stood out to me as ones that could be tweaked in an interesting way. Let's be honest, there's a ton of abilities that should be completely destroyed and replaced. It'd be a lot more exciting and easy to gig above most of them to boost attack, special attack, and speed. It would absolutely be an improvement to delete Truant, Slow Start, and Defeatist. But if I did those things, it really wouldn't be different from things everyone has probably already suggested. So what would be the point, right? Hopefully some of these ideas were interesting or at least jank enough to be funny. Feel free to implement these interpretations into mods or even your own turn-based games. What changes would you want to try? What ability changes would you make? Tell me the most broken movesets you can think of using these adjusted abilities. I'm really interested in what degenerate strategies you come up with. That's all I've got. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye!